All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here on this beautiful Saturday late day. It's great to see you all here. All right. Well, I love graffiti, so I love that I get to do this kind of work here, and I thank you all for being part of it. And we want to thank the Friends of the San Francisco Public Library who help support all the work we do here. And then we also want to acknowledge that we occupy the unceded and ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone people, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. We recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland, and as uninvited guests, we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples. We want to pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush community. And with that, I encourage you to check out Segorte Land Trust, an all-women-led indigenous group coming from the East Bay, who are working on land back movement and land rematuration. They just acquired 46 acres of land from Oakland, city of Oakland, so they are doing some amazing work. Check them out. Support them with a $ support. And the library has tons of programs, lots of events. Come check us out. We're back in the role of things. Mission Graphica, part of Mission Cultural Center, an amazing organization, has been doing art for 45 years plus. Their exhibit across in the Jewett Gallery is amazing. You must check it out. We're their first stop in our traveling exhibit. And they're going to even be traveling outside of the state. So it is really important art, and I encourage you all to check it out. But today we're here for Dregs One. Woo! Go ahead, give it up. Give it up. So if you live in the city, you live with a lot of graffiti, right? Love it. Do you love it all? I love it all. Me too. So coming straight out of Lakeview. Yeah, let's give Lakeview. Woo! Love Lakeview. Nice and cool. Dregs One is a first-hand historian with deep roots in Bay Area graffiti art. He is a multi-talented artist, rapper, record label owner, and the man behind the popular podcast History of the Bay, which educates us all on renowned local graffiti artists and their indelible influence on the Bay Area landscape. This event is a partnership with the Letterform Archive, who right now has an exhibit going on called Subscription to Mischief, and it's about graffiti zines from the 90s. Go check that out. It's going to run through November. They're open Thursday, 1 to 8, and then Friday through Sunday, 11 to 6. So go check them out. And then without further ado, Dregs One, everybody.
What's up, y'all? What's up? What's up? What's up? How we doing, San Francisco? Thank you so much to the San Francisco Public Library for organizing this. This is really special. Shout out to the Letterform Archives as well. This is dope for me because I spent a lot of time in this building. I worked in the Tenderloin for many years. I would come in here and I would do all time. I would read comic books, go on the computer, hang out and just work on stuff. You know, this is back in the days before I had a car, take BART. So I really spent a lot of time in this library. I went to a field trip like the year it opened in like 3rd grade, 5th grade or something like that. So that's kind of crazy to be here at full circle doing this type of presentation. I appreciate all y'all for coming. And what do you say? Should we get into this thing? The history of Bay Area graffiti. All right, so before I really get into the history, it's good to talk a little bit about my history. Like, why do I even talk about this? Why am I qualified to talk about this? Maybe I'm not qualified. Oh, well, ain't no one gonna stop me. But basically, I grew up in San Francisco, born and raised. Anyone here born and raised in the city? That's right. So basically, like, for me, graffiti was like part of life. It was an everyday thing. It was a rite of passage. I never claimed to be like the illest graffiti writer, the king of San Francisco. I just participated in it because it was the culture of where I was growing up, and most of it was encountered on the buses. And at the same time, yeah, I would just see like this amazing artwork like all over the city. This is one of like the first, maybe the first pieces of graffiti I ever remember seeing. Anyone know where this was at? Yeah, Market Street. This is by Twist. I remember always seeing that as a kid. It always spoke to me. It always tripped me out. I always wondered like, who are these guys? Who does this? And then I discovered later on, like, I'll just tell you really quick. I had a cast on. I broke all four of my fingers. You know how kids like sign my cast. Some kid was like, let me hit up my tag. I was like, oh, you can just have a tag? Like, oh, how come I don't have a tag? So that was like the very first day I started doing graffiti, basically, or actually as soon as the cast got off. Um, at the same time, I was always into music. This is me and my crew, the Gas Mask Colony. This is when we first started rapping. This is actually a famous graffiti spot right here called the Ghost Yards, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. But yeah, that was basically like our life was like tagging, freestyle raps, house parties. The city was kind of crazy, but at the same time, it was a playground. That's why I talk so much about the history of the Bay Area, just because I experienced all this stuff, and man, these were like the funnest times of my life, man. And so I always like incorporated graffiti into my music. This is my first mixtape ever. It's probably worth like $1,000. But you can see like I always included like graffiti into my artwork, into the stuff that I rapped about. I always wanted to represent the city. I started doing graffiti and making music like literally right at the same time. So that's basically, my beginnings. In terms of graffiti, I was just like I said, I was just a tagger. I wrote a different name than Dregs for most of my graffiti career, so I'm not gonna tell you what it is, but I got caught a lot of times. I always had to change my name. Um, it sucks. It sucks sitting in jail, being like, "Damn, I'm in here for writing on a wall." So I just put it to the side, and I was also like, the more graffiti I did, the less music I made. So I focused more on the music, and I was kind of like put the graffiti to the side. And then one day I was hanging out with this guy Joker, and I was just sketching on a piece of paper, and he was like, dude, that's good. Like, if you put that on a wall, you'd be burning like most of the people that paint. And I was like, for real? And he's like, yeah, let's go. And so he took me to go paint, and I started getting into piecing, which for people who don't know, that's short for like a masterpiece. Is like not just a tag. It's not quite like a quick bubble letter throw up. It's a full color burner. And I realized, oh, I'm actually pretty good. And so I started getting up doing pieces again, and just having fun. Like graffiti, there's a lot of like skill and talent that you need, and you develop these skills by talking to other people in your community, learning from your peers, learning from what's already on the wall. When I was a kid, I didn't really have the confidence to think I could do something like this. Not saying that this is like the greatest ever, but it's pretty good. Um, so that was kind of a thing. Like that's why I encourage people, like especially young people, like just try it. Don't be afraid to just try it, because you never know that's the only way to get better is just try it out. I started having the confidence, being like, man, I can do this. I can do characters. I can do full letters. And I started getting really ambitious. And this is like top tier to me. Somebody dissed this wall recently. I still got to fix it, but whatever. Haters gonna hate. Um, that's part of the game. But this was my jam right here. Like basically full walls, top to bottom, pieces, backgrounds, letters, characters, portraits. This is like dedicated to my neighborhood and the rapper Cougnut from IMP. And a lot of the pieces I was doing at this time, people think they were legal. I'm not saying that they weren't, but a lot of times you like that became my jam too. Like just seeing like how can I do stuff like this without people even realizing I might not have permission. And then, the cops show up like, hey, what are you doing? Do you have permission? Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, I guess it worked. Because if you think about it, you know, if I'm not like running away or acting scared, they just figure, all right, I guess this guy's just doing a mural. So that's basically my graffiti career in a nutshell. And I transitioned into doing social media content, like not trying to be like the expert or like, you know, put myself above anyone. I just like sharing the things that I'm passionate about, which is rap and graffiti. And that transitioned into this podcast, The History of the Bay. Has anyone checked it out? Yeah, right on, right on. We're off to a pretty good start. So yeah, I do social media content. I interview graffiti writers, rappers, people who have interesting stories, and it's all about sharing the stuff that I've been into for over 20 years and I'm really passionate about. So let's get into graffiti. What is graffiti? Most people associate it with stuff like this, which I don't particularly mind because to me it's like you can't pick and choose and say, well, this stuff is all bad. They didn't have permission to do this. This is ugly. I didn't want to see this. My thing is, I don't want to see billboards advertising cigarettes and alcohol, but I don't have a choice about that. I don't put these ugly gray buildings in the community. They're not made with any type of aesthetic purpose. And we don't really have a voice of people who live here of deciding what actually goes in this space. So that's what graffiti is about. A lot of people, when I do talks and stuff, people will come up like, I don't like the tagging. I don't like it. They don't have permission. I'm like, man, there's a lot of things that people do without permission that's way worse than putting paint on walls. To me, I love all of it. I love it. I don't even care how good you are, how weak you are, I love all of it. To me, graffiti is about basically saying you can never fully control people because the urge to write on a wall is natural. We all did it as kids, as babies. People have been writing on walls since the beginning of civilization. And once you have a city or a society that's completely clear of graffiti, that means that everybody is like following the rules. I am not supposed to do this. Da da da. At the same time, I always do like to like talk about the consequences of graffiti to like youngsters and stuff. I never encourage people. Yeah, you should do that. Yeah, go ahead, do it. But at the same time, if you're in it, you know, be in it to win it. That's my approach. I'll give you an example. This is a mural I did with some kids at what's it called? Horace Mann Middle School on whatever that is, like 24th Street. That's right. I was like teaching kids about like doing letters and stuff, and we were supposed to like be given the space to do a mural. And this is a design that the kids made themselves. And as I'm like finishing it up, like somebody came out like, "Whoa, what are you doing? The district didn't approve, and we didn't get the oh, we can't do this." So this is like all I got away with. I kind of knew that going into it. I was like, "Come on, kids, let's just do this." And this is still there, but I never got to finish it. They're like, "Well, just hold on. We need to get permission from the district controller, and that needs to go to the paperwork through the." So this is just kind of what I'm saying. It's like sometimes you just got to do it. And that's still there, and it's a beautiful message. I always think, like I always tell myself, one day, man, I'm just going to hop the fence and just finish this. Okay, so let's really go into the story of graffiti. Now, the stuff I showed you earlier, the broken windows, all that, the tagging on the walls, that's the dictionary version of graffiti. I always say, graffiti writing culture, people who call ourselves writers, that's not the dictionary definition. This is a culture that pretty much started in the East Coast. At least that's where it evolved. And it's about getting your name up as many places as possible with as much style. And it kind of got lumped into hip hop. It's before hip hop. There's a lot of graffiti writers who don't even care about hip hop, but it's still kind of part of what was coming out of New York City at the time with breakdancing and rapping and DJing. And basically, it was kids who created all this stuff, which is what is dope about graffiti to me, excuse me, is that it's a youth-driven art form. And the slang, the styles, the techniques that came out of the New York City subway train movement are still basically the foundations of the culture that we use today. This is from a documentary called Style Wars that spread all across the world. It was very influential. But here on the West Coast, we got a lot of gangs. And a lot of the graffiti that was early on in the West Coast in California came from cholo writing, which is basically a way of shouting out people from your neighborhood and shouting out your neighborhood. And some of this stuff gets really, I like this graffiti too. I love seeing this type of stuff. Some of it gets really complex and advanced, and that was the inspiration for a lot of graffiti writers in the Bay. I also got to shout out the mural movement. I read once that the Mission District has more murals than any other neighborhood in the country. I don't know if that's still true, but I believe it. This is like something that's really close to like the Chicano culture, people like Diego Rivera. This is the women's building too in the Mission District. So we grow up around all this type of stuff as kids, the cholo writing, the murals, all that. And then when you throw in that East Coast influence of graffiti writing is what you get. And speaking of the East Coast, this is Cuba. He is the first person to ever do a piece in the city of San Francisco. Cuba is actually, he was actually from Baltimore, and he was a student of a writer named Dr. Revolt, who was also from Baltimore but got up in the New York City subway system. So Cuba basically got a lot of his game, a lot of his skills and styles from Revolt. And actually in conversation with him, he told me that he came to San Francisco to like follow the Grateful Dead or something, and like he never left. Shout out to Cuba. He passed away, I believe, like 2 years now. Rest in peace, Cuba. He painted the first piece. He brought these styles single-handedly from the East Coast to San Francisco. I believe the first piece that he painted might have been like 83, 84. And here's Dr. Revolt, who I just mentioned, and Zephyr, another New York City train rider from the East Coast. This is still, I believe this is still there on Fillmore. And so, yeah, you had like guys kind of bringing this style to the Bay Area. So let's go into the 80s. You can really see here like the beginnings of what Bay Area styles would be. That's Mike Dream right there. I believe he started writing in 1983. And you could see, you got to keep in mind too, this is before, nowadays you have like paint that's made for art. This is like industrial paint. This is like for like painting cars and stuff. The styles and the skills like kept developing. That's Zephyr too, as a piece he painted back in the day. So you can see like the evolution. This is another dude, Riff. I believe he was also from the East Coast. He came out here and schooled a lot of writers. So you can kind of see these styles developing, the colors, the techniques, the pieces, the location. It just started exploding. I think around the same time, Star Wars came out, I believe in like 84. So this is when a lot of these writers were picking this up. This is Dregs One from TMF. He's actually from Daly City. That's another piece by Cuba. You can kind of see, like, just from these images alone, how things are starting to pick up over time. Things maybe still look a little basic in terms of the styles, but it's starting to like really develop this culture. I believe that's in Oakland. I think this might be in Berkeley right here. I don't recall. So you can see it still looks a little messy, a little sloppy, but it's getting there. And then boom, you got stuff like this as the decade progresses. 80s style is like really flashy, like neon. That's a Nexus in San Jose. San Jose has a lot of dope writers. This is history of the Bay Area graffiti, so I'm trying to cover all these different places. These are some really famous yards that were down in San Jose where a lot of people got styles up. Some more stuff by San Jose. So you have all these different pockets: Berkeley, San Jose, Oakland, San Francisco, the North Bay, the 707, Fresno, LA. All these places on the West Coast are developing their own styles. This is Silver Terrace Playground. A lot of these places too, this is by Twick. I believe that's in the McAteer. A lot of these places, like this is the 23rd yard in Oakland, there were like places where graffiti was like pretty much tolerated, and that allowed a lot of the styles to develop, like Psycho City, which is right here in Market. This is a piece by Dregs One, who I just mentioned. Doug, that piece that said Psycho City pretty much gave this spot, this parking lot, the name Psycho City. This is like one of the graffiti meccas of the world, where people were coming from all over to paint. This is the DuBose Tunnel where the N Judah goes through. Fury was the first person to hit that up. And another big part about the Bay Area, especially San Francisco, is the buses. As I mentioned before, we have our own style of tags. Whether you like it or not, I personally love this stuff. This is my boy, Fine. We actually went to high school together. This style is like the one flow. It's basically called a one flow, a bus flow. It's made to go along with the motion of the bus. And when you're tagging on the bus, you're trying to do it as quick as possible without the driver seeing you and kicking you off. And at the same time, we used to go up into the muni yards. And they used to be so chill, you could pretty much just go up in there and hang out. You can bring some beers and a boombox and just do whatever you wanted. This guy, Fine, man, his crew, BST, actually went so hard. They were like the first graffiti writers to ever be sued by the city of San Francisco. If you look now, like it's interesting, a lot of the kids I see tagging now have the bus flows, but they don't tag on buses. But it's still the Frisco style. Okay, how we doing so far? Are we enjoying this? All right, cool. Right on, appreciate y'all. So another big development in the 80s is like I said, we had Style Wars, a documentary, I believe it was on PBS. Like graffiti is starting to go into art galleries. It's starting to go into mainstream culture a little bit, which some people resisted, some people still resisted to this day. But these books right here, you see, you can't really have like, if you stay the same, you don't grow. So things have to change, things have to evolve. And the result is a lot of people get the inspiration that they wouldn't have had access to otherwise. These books right here by Henry Chalfant, Subway Art by Martha Cooper and Henry Chalfant. They're prolific photographers of New York graffiti, covering the subway systems, and spray can art with Henry Chalfant and Jim Prigoff. Rest in peace, Jim Prigoff. He passed away a couple years ago. Subway art covered the New York subway. Spray can art covered the scene that was bubbling up worldwide in the 80s. This is a piece by Dregs One that's in that book, Free South Africa. I really have no idea what that has to do with Marvin the Martian, but it's still really dope. And this is Crayon, TWS. That's one of my teachers as well, one of my good friends. Crayon was really ahead of the game. Again, this is the 80s. This guy's doing all this Robotech characters and stuff like that. He had a whole page in the book, Spray Can Art, and like getting in that book, it just, part of the thing about graffiti is the fame, right? You're getting up your name so much that you want the fame. You want to put your skills down and be known. This was one way that people were doing it early in the 80s, and the Bay Area was represented in that book. Yes, sir. This is there's other people in Crayon's crew, TWS, together with Style. His mission was to take the best writers from all over the Bay Area, San Jose, the East Bay. This is a piece, character by Raven, and another one by Picasso. You can see how advanced these guys were for the 80s. This is the type of stuff I love seeing. And again, yeah, we have more stuff by TWS members. We have Raven up there. These guys were getting busy. Also got a shout out King157. Also from San Jose. This guy has probably hit up more freight trains than anybody else in the world. Possibly. Maybe one of them. I don't know. We'll talk a little bit more about him later. But you see like some of these really important writers who are still writing today, like 30 years plus. They started emerging in the 80s. And now we're going to get into the 90s. Okay, so this is from a documentary created by Dean from TMF called Malicious Mischief. You can check out the whole thing on YouTube. It's pretty dope. As you can see, graffiti in the city was just exploding. And I'm talking like styles and bombing, the buses. You pretty much see it all just in that short clip. This is when I would say in the 90s, San Francisco, the Bay Area was probably the top graffiti destination in the world. In the world! And then, as I talked about earlier, the early media of spray can art and style wars, you have more writers producing their own media. Just like anyone here ever skateboard? Any skaters here? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, like a lot of the skate videos were like do it yourself. Just get a camera. This is before everyone had a camera in their pocket. So the graffiti writers was kind of taking the same approach. Same with the hip hop at the time of people just making tapes and recording tapes. People would just take VHS tapes and burn them for their friends. So that was Malicious Mischief. This is one called Dirt Style by Spy, which you can also see on YouTube. Let's check this out really quick. This video is straight dirt style. Blunt up now.
Damn, Scoo got hella paint. Damn, 4-2 got the cry lawn on hit, nigga.
This is at Psycho City. I have no idea what that kid's doing, but he's going in.
I'm burnt as hell. Mike motherfucking Dream in the house.
It's Mike Dream, who we'll talk about.
I'm burnt as hell. Mike motherfucking Dream in the house. Toasted, bloody, danked out.
Where we chilling?
We chilling in Psycho City, man. Brought
Where
to you
is
by
that?
Doug One.
What's the name?
Psycho City, man. Psycho, man. You know, like crazy and shit. Yeah.
See here.
So this kind of shows how important Psycho City was, and people just showing up and kicking it. People from all over the Bay Area.
I just called juggling. Oh, say what's up, Alex?
Anyone know who this is? DJ Qbert.
Hey, check it out. So I'm gonna give you the level shoe and hang in the hammer new. I'll give you a call back later. All right, Hank. Come on, he's videotaping. Okay, bye. Oh, he said peace. But where were we? That was dumb.
I threw that in there because this is the early 90s. This is when, like I said, hip-hop, right? Graffiti is not necessarily hip-hop is not necessarily part of graffiti, but graffiti is definitely part of hip-hop, if that makes sense. So you have this scene of young people in the city, DJs, rappers, dancers, graffiti writers, all building this shared community, and the results of what it became are pretty impressive. Let's see, I think I got another video clip. This is DJ Qbert and Doug One, Wave Twisters. So this is where all that stuff kind of became.
Who are you? Where do you come from?
Intruder.
I repeat, who are you?
I am the Red Worm.
We're getting something.
Widescreen if possible.
That.
I am the Red Worm.
Okay. Has anyone seen Wave Twisters before? Yeah. Pretty trippy. It's basically like a story about like an intergalactic dentist or something, like scratching on his wristwatch. But basically, this is where graffiti has gone, because all these illustrations were done by Dregs One, TMF, who I just mentioned. And this is the results of, you see Cuba in the beginning just scratching in his bedroom, and now he's, considered one of the best DJs in the world. And I believe this video is pretty successful. So this is just what I'm just throwing this in there just to show where graffiti is going in the early '90s. And I'll give you one more example of how graffiti started going more and more into the mainstream. The sound is kind of rough, but try your best. Oh, wait. Oh, it's not playing. Oh well, that was a that was a Converse commercial featuring Mike Dream and a couple other writers. So I was just using that in there to just talk about Converse graffiti, blah blah blah. You guys get it? Okay, cool. Speaking of Mike Dream is probably one of my biggest inspirations in life. Not just graffiti, he was considered the best graffiti writer in the Bay Area. I don't think that's an overstatement. Basically, Mike Dream was a Filipino brother from Oakland and the founder of the TDK crew. They're still out there doing their thing. Mike represented the heights of bombing, the heights of skill, the heights of style. Really advanced. Also, just known for being a really cool dude, really approachable, even to people who are just coming up. Being known as like a real player, a real street cat, somebody who really understood the hustle and the struggle. And most importantly, he was also really big on putting messages in his work. Even the name Dream itself has a really powerful message that's still around to this day. I'm sad I never got to meet Mike Dream. He was killed in 2000 in a robbery gone bad in West Oakland. But I always try to shout out Dream and pay tribute to him. And I've been honored to like build with some people that were close to him and learn more about his life. Speaking of other writers who passed away tragically, this is Ty. At only 18 years old, he passed away. He was known as just being a king of bombing, just prolific, somebody who was completely obsessed with graffiti, and just like his whole life revolved around graffiti from like the time he woke up to the time he went to bed, which I understand he didn't sleep very much. He was a Chinese brother. His family immigrated from the Philippines to the Bay Area. I believe he grew up in Santa Clara. And he was killed by a rooftop, the owner of a building, when he was climbing on a rooftop to do graffiti in the Tenderloin. And he was shot in the back of the head as he was running away. That's a really messed up case. I've covered that a lot on my series. The person who shot him was never charged. All case charges dropped, which is crazy to me, that you can get killed for painting on a wall. Obviously, like I said, right, I don't condone the negative aspects of graffiti. Yes, it's illegal. Yes, it's a crime. Yes, I get it. You respect people's property, but for somebody to be killed like that is crazy. And it reminds me a lot of like the Stop Asian Hate movement that started gaining traction in recent years. It shows that this has been an ongoing issue. So rest in peace, Ty. I don't like to sugarcoat nothing, and graffiti can be a dangerous activity to participate in. But let's get back into more of the good stuff, like the style, the dope writers that emerged in the '90s. This is Twist, who I showed you earlier, Barry McGee. He was one of the first people to really take graffiti into the world of gallery art and commercial art, and actually be accepted by institutions like the Art Institute. I believe he has one of the cleanest tags. If you look in the top right corner, for people who don't know, a tag is like your signature. I believe he has like the cleanest tags ever. There's a lot of people who bite off of his styles. He also put a lot of messages out about what was going on in the city, and he also represented himself uniquely with a screw, if you see in that bottom corner, which is really unique. Twist, screw, It's pretty dope. Got to shout out Lord's crew, who started in San Jose by Bazaar. Lord's has like hundreds of members now from all over the world. These are some of the cats: Jenks, Quake, Pastime. There's so many more. I can't name all of them possibly. Legends of Rare Design, really dope crew that started in the Bay Area. Reminisce. Anyone remember seeing these horses around? Yeah. I even asked my mom once. I'm like, you remember seeing those horses? She was like, yes, I do. This is also really dope, really unique. You know, nowadays you have street art, right? Which is like kind of different from graffiti, where this is kind of more accepted. But Reminisce is like still graffiti. Like, she had a name. She got up. She had her own style. She put her art in places where you wouldn't normally expect to see it without permission. And I think it really tripped people out, just walking down the street and all of a sudden there's a beautiful black and white horse. And she's now a sculptor, award-winning sculptor, and she lives in LA. I get to chop it up with her sometimes. Hopefully I'll interview her one day. That would be dope. Shout out to FSC crew. They started in Berkeley. Rest in peace, Syra from that crew also passed away. This is Giggs and Eve and Knack. And yeah, they put it down for many years in freights. I'm just using this as an example of the graffiti popping up all over the Bay Area in the 90s. King 157, who I mentioned earlier, really went big on freights, painted probably thousands of freights. So another big thing about the 90s is that people started migrating to the Bay Area. A lot of these guys came just to do graffiti or to be part of the art scene in some shape or fashion. You have guys like KR from New York and Psycho, who I believe is from Washington, D.C. All these people coming through really started making a mark. This is why San Francisco has been so dope in graffitis, because all these people from around the world were influencing people with their styles. And they were taking some of the styles that we were developing and putting that in their repertoire. Giant is another dope example. He's originally from Albuquerque, one of the masters of graffiti. These guys from Baltimore had a big impact. Felon, Jace, Soap, rest in peace. Soap also passed away. They had a crew called IHU. You can guess what that stands for. These guys, woo, MSK, AWR crew. These guys came from Southern California and pretty much like destroyed San Francisco. Like basically turned the San Francisco graffiti scene upside down. Styles that we had never seen before. Going big, hitting places we had never thought of hitting before. Just really putting it down. There was actually a lot of tension with these guys because people felt that they were like kind of taking over graffiti in the city, and also kind of like treating San Francisco writers like, oh, they ain't nothing, like, you know, we're from LA, this is ours. And there was a little bit of back and forth between them, which eventually got worked out. But you got to respect MSK. AWR is probably the best graffiti crew in the world. I mean, they've since moved on. I don't think very many of them live here anymore, but they have a worldwide presence doing stuff like this. Okay, so that was the 80s, that was the 90s. Now let's go into the early 2000s. The spot is called the Thunderdome.
What's up? Where you been? Community service? Where the fuck were you? I asked about you.
Tell them to go fuck themselves?
Yeah, because I was digging ditches. You gonna roll with me to Dino's show tonight? Yeah. Dino's show.
Talk more about this film in a second. Quality life, yeah, you got it. This is the Ghost Yards. Another famous day spot. This movie really captured the lifestyle of early 2000s graffiti.
Goes one for the money, two for the hoes. Don't got either, but I still
That's my boy
shows.
Topper
Step to Lord Top,
from
he
Lord's
knows
Crew.
I'm insane. Or what's up to my homeboy Vane? I'm always high off cocaine, blowing up like propane. Turn your most famous rapper to no name. He got no game. I'm onto wet and reckless when I put a square in his place, just like Tetris.
Pretty dope. So that was basically that was when I started coming around. I was like a kid going to like art shows like that, like whoa, hanging out with Topper, doing freestyles. Quality of life is like one of the few dramatic interpretations of the graffiti lifestyle. I think it definitely covers the good and the bad and the ugly of graffiti. As you saw that scene open with the guy working community service. Woo, doing community service sucks. I probably did a couple thousand hours of community service in my time. This actual writer who was one of the actors in the film. A lot of the people you just saw in that clip were writers at the time. Piece by Piece, which I use a lot of clips from. This is probably the definitive documentary on San Francisco graffiti. Really dope. If you haven't seen this, you can check it out. And then Infamy also takes place all over the country, but there's a lot of focus on the Bay Area as well. I saw all three of these movies in theaters. It's pretty cool. So this is also, I'm putting this in there just to also show, like, again, you have the evolution of graffiti, but you also have the evolution of graffiti media at the same time. So these are pictures I took in like 2004. Attic from Seattle just wrecked this whole city for years. Orphan, rest in peace. He was also another famous, prolific graffiti artist. The early 2000s, the 90s was dope stylistically. The early 2000s was just like crushed though. Like the city was crushed. These are more pictures I took back in the day. That guy's name, I believe, is Alberto. He was the truck owner. He wanted me to take his picture with his truck. But again, all good things come to an end. So the early 2000s was probably the last era of graffiti before gentrification. I mean, there's still gentrification to this day, but I think they really started cracking down on graffiti in the early 2000s, and I'll give you an example.
10 o'clock news, find out how an alleged graffiti gang got caught. Games for rebellious teenagers, San Francisco authorities beg to differ. They have brought serious charges against 8 adults who police say are members of a graffiti gang that has spent years defacing the city. KTVU Channel 2 reporter Rob Roth has this story.
At the House of Louis Appliance Center on Bryant Street, south of Market, Alvin Louis looks at the side of his building in disgust. Here, despite a cyclone fence, the wall is covered with graffiti.
To me, it's not something that's pleasant to come to work to. But the other thing, too, is that what do you think the customers will think when they see that on the side of the building? I mean, it's not very professional, businesslike.
This, police say, is just one of hundreds of buildings in San Francisco that a gang of graffiti vandals has struck over the past 5 years. The group, they say, calls itself KUK, which stands for Kill Until Killed. Commuters may have noticed this as they first entered the city from the Bay Bridge. This, too, police say, is the work of KUK. But law enforcement is hoping the gang's reign of destruction has ended. A grand jury recently indicted 8 of its members on a felony graffiti charge, and the district attorney intends to prosecute. Police say KUK was the most prolific and destructive group of vandals they can remember.
They were very good at what they did, crawling on small ledges, climbing up rear fire escapes, sometimes breaking into
That guy's name is really
properties or
Putz.
climbing fences.
So Putz, man, Putz was like the graffiti Terminator. Like no joke. I was in juvenile community service, and Putz was like the supervisor. He used to like make us run laps around the police station on Valencia and like do push-ups, and I'd make us clean up needles in the tenderloin, all types of crazy stuff. But he was like a graffiti Terminator. Like if you were getting up in the city, like he was going to find you and get you. Some more people I'll highlight in the city. This is F Word. woman writer, really dope, really prolific. I believe she's from the South Bay as well. Giraffa. A lot of people ask me all the time, do something about Giraffa. You know that giraffe, dude? I like that giraffe. He's super dope. And then right now, I feel like we're transitioning into present day. Oakland is just destroyed. Oakland, like graffiti is like damn near legal in Oakland. And also got a shout out Animal, rest in peace Animal. He was originally from Salt Lake City, Utah, I believe, but he eventually moved to Oakland. He was a big part of the Oakland graffiti scene. Also got a shout out 3 a.m. recently. He rest in peace. I believe he's originally from Reno. Again, you have this like kind of resurgence in the East Bay of like people moving from all over, like just to be part of what's going on here with graffiti, which I think is dope. And today in the city, woo! I took that picture in the left corner like just the other day. Graffiti is like kind of like back, I feel like. You know, a lot of it, like I said earlier, the bus flow tagging is back. There's people who are really getting high spots. At the same time, the consequences are pretty serious. That stuff in the corner with the Bart Simpson, that dude basically he was on Instagram Live, and while he was painting, and somebody saw his Instagram Live and called the cops on him, like, this guy is over here. Oh, man. So as I talk about like the media evolving, it's really interesting. So we started with like books, magazines, DVDs, homemade cassettes, homemade tapes. Now it's the internet. Now it's social media. There's some really cool stuff that you can do. Again, I don't believe in fighting any of this stuff. At the same time, I also don't believe in snitching on yourself. And I'm really mindful to like not put out stuff that hasn't already been known publicly when I talk about graffiti. That's why sometimes people ask me to like cover what's going on right now. Trust me, the police watch everything. There's police who just literally, they just scroll on Instagram all day. I know this for a fact. And at the same time though, I think what's dope is that you gotta look at a lot of these young guys, it's like post-pandemic. These kids like had to sit down for like 2 years, man. No school, no nothing. So I think in that time, graffiti has exploded. And you know what? I support it. I support them having this outlet. There's so many writers going out right now, I can't even keep track of it. The only difference I will say is that there's less emphasis on style and more on bombing and getting up. One reason is because all these places I showed you earlier, the Thunderdome, the Ghost Yard, Silver Terrace, there's not that many spaces for young people to even practice and sit down and do some of these skills and learn some of these styles because of gentrification. A lot of the places I painted back in the days, it's crazy how much time I spent hanging out in abandoned warehouses. Like straight up, like just hanging out in abandoned warehouses painting. Those warehouses are condos now. So again, I support all these kids going out there and expressing themselves because it's basically showing you can't gentrify the whole city, can't gentrify everything, can't whitewash all of this. We're still here, we're still doing our thing. I just covered in about an hour, I just covered like 30 years of graffiti. It's 2023, I hope it still keeps going. And I guess that's my presentation. I would love to field some questions if we got time. If anyone got questions, Anissa's back there with the mic. Oh, there's someone right behind you.
Right behind me. So many people right behind me. Pass it down first.
What's up?
What's up?
My friend had a question, but she's kind of nervous to ask, so I'm
good.
gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and ask for her. She was wondering, like, why do you think graffiti isn't as accepted in the mainstream, and why graffiti artists don't get as much respect as, say, other mainstream artists?
Okay, because it's illegal. It has to stay illegal. Like if it's sanitized, where if it's like it's legal graffiti, you can tag on these mailboxes now. It's like it just kind of loses the edge. It's never gonna be accepted entirely by the mainstream. It's starting to get accepted artistically a little bit, which is cool, but at the same time, graffiti writers aren't looking for mainstream acceptance because this is a culture that's by us, for us. Even in this presentation, as thorough as I tried to be, there's no way I could ever like tell you everything that goes on in the graffiti world, and that's kind of the way it should be. So I don't think graffiti needs mainstream success or validation. At the same time, there's people who've transitioned into doing dope things in the art world and come from graffiti, and I think it's dope that there are more people getting their shine.
Sorry. I actually had a different question. I was actually wondering how, because I've never done graffiti and I've never been like doing this type of thing. How do graffiti artists become like popular? Like, how do you guys like? What was his name? Dream. Like,
Yeah.
how do y'all know? You know?
The
I don't know.
more you do it, the more popular you become. The better you do it, the more popular you become. The name of the game is getting up. That's the dope thing about graffiti is like the streets are the judge, the streets are the critics. You just know. People know when you get up so much, your presence becomes undeniable. When you hit spots that no one's ever hit, it becomes undeniable. When you have a style that nobody's ever seen before, it becomes undeniable. In between then, there's plenty of people that come and go, but the people who really make their mark are the people who like give their everything to getting up, and people just notice that over time. Yo.
Greetings. Basic principles. What's the relation between graffiti and private property? Because it developed in the 80s in the East Coast when people were being creative with the destructive entropy of abandoned buildings. They're recreating, painting the buildings, making them beautiful, right? But it was a whole thing like, I got my name, I'm doing a bomb, so that's 2 colors. I'm doing a piece, that's 3 plus colors plus an outline in a field, the whole system. Yeah, to me, it became a response to the urban decay in the environment. So we went out and did things. The first time I ever did graffiti, I walked along the tracks on the other side of my apartment complex in Fresno, California. There's all these cans sitting here. I'm like, I look around, and I see this piece or letter or face or happy face. And so I started doing it when I was 8 years old, But there is a magazine. It's called Fumes. It came out in 2000. I saw it at a Borders bookstore in Portland, Oregon, where I was on vacation. And Fumes #1, I look in the front cover and it talks about the description, but the first sentence, graffiti is war, period. I'm like, and it breaks down this whole system. Yeah, basically the idea that I think about, like, let's get all the graffiti artists together and have a space where we can practice and go back and forth. And, you can do a piece over a bomb, and people who do bombs over, like, nice letters and real art, like, down in Oakland, I'm like, well, what the fuck? That's disrespectful to me, But everybody's got their own style, their own flavor, their own name, their own the way they kill, what they do, what they like, stickers, all that, the whole culture. And it's developed, according to Keras One in his 40th
I'm
anniversary.
sorry, brother. Do you have a question? I'm not trying to cut you off
sorry.
or be disrespectful.
What is the relation between graffiti and private property?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing everything else. Like I said, I wasn't trying to interrupt you, but graffiti and private property, I mean, there's just certain things that I will not hit up. I would never hit up a church. I don't like tagging on people's houses. I don't like disrespecting small businesses. At the same time, it's just the reality that some people don't feel that way, and I can't justify it or even explain it. It's just kind of one of those things that just, like you said, is part of the urban landscape, and for better or for worse, I think it's here to stay. I just would encourage people not to, destroy hardworking people's stuff, but, it is what it is.
I'm Fresh One, BSK, MDH,
What's up,
QMC,
brother? What's up?
AS. And I wanted to piggyback off that cat that said graffiti wasn't mainstream or has it not be mainstream. When we started painting like Crayon, Dream, Crash, all of us, we used to do our own graffiti clothes. You feel me? Because you couldn't get them nowhere. It was unknown. But nowadays, you can walk into Mervyn's and buy a graffiti shirt. You know what I mean? It is been accepted by mainstream in a lot of ways. street bombing will always never be accepted. You are right about that. But it has been accepted in the mainstream media in terms of art galleries, in terms of art itself as a movement. You feel me? And it's like, it has some mainstream aspects, but bombing will always be underground. Always.
Right on. Thank you for expanding on that. Shout out to Fresh, a legend. Definitely big part of the history.
Hi. I was wondering, like, what's your thoughts on like newer like bombers tagging up like long time pieces that have been there for a long time? Because that happens pretty often. I see a piece that's been there forever, and then some random new kid just tagging it up and like disrespecting it, pretty much.
Yeah, it's pretty whack, but I mean, there's like a lot of older cats will get mad at the younger generation for doing stuff like that, but there's not as many of us going out there and actually teaching the younger people and showing them why that's not correct. And at the same time, I've learned to accept that that's just the name of the game. There are rules of graffiti, but one of the rules is there are no rules. You can't really control it. Nothing lasts forever. Everybody gets dissed at some point in their career, so I'm not as hard on it as I used to be. But there's definitely certain things that's like, man, it's kind of heartbreaking when they get disrespected, including even murals that aren't even graffiti related.
Hi, I
Hi.
had a question. Was just curious to see if you feel like there are any trends or how graffiti art murals are evolving, and do you feel like folks are now getting more inspirations from other countries, like outside of the U.S., to get all their inspiration?
Yeah, absolutely. I think stylistically, there's a lot of people in Europe and South America that are way more advanced than what's going on in the States right now and bringing a lot of the styles. I mean, the dope thing about graffiti is that it's very regional. So this is why I like to cover the Bay Area stuff because there is a distinct Bay Area style that's different from New York or Brazil or Paris. I was in Paris last year. Paris is like crushed with graffiti. I love seeing it. Um, there's always going to be kind of trends. There's always going to be people doing their thing, and then someone comes along like a Mike Dream and kind of breaks down what people were originally doing and just comes with something new, and then people start adapting that way. That's another dope thing about graffiti. It's always evolving. It's always changing. And with the internet, now there is a big worldwide influence.
So I wanted to know, just based on the questions about graffiti being like becoming mainstream, are people who get paid to do graffiti, maybe on like inside somebody's apartment or whatever, are they sellouts in your community?
Hell no. I get
No.
paid. I love getting paid for graffiti. Get your money. I mean, people, it's like, I'll just say it, man. Sometimes there's people who don't get any money who point fingers at people who do get money, and that's always a bad look. That's always a red flag. To me, you're only selling it out if you're compromising the culture in some way, if you're watering it down, if you have a negative impact on what other people are doing. But, you know, I respect all the writers who are still going out there and bombing for the love, people who are even older than I am. I respect that. I also really respect the people who have been able to transition into art careers, whether it's design, comic books, fine art, clothing, tattoos. There's just so many possibilities, and that's what I love about graffiti is it took me on this journey to where you see what I'm doing now. I never thought I would be doing this when I was going out tagging with my friends. So yeah, I believe get your money.
All right. So a follow up on that is like, is there a clear distinction where if you fill up more, like you showed that example where you said you did top to bottom or bottom top, that it becomes a mural? Like, where does graffiti become a mural? And
That's a good question. Um, yeah, you having it. I would call what I was talking about earlier in graffiti terms. That's more of a production. Like we typically never call it a mural. Like, hey, let's go do a mural, guys. That's kind of like an outsider's term of how they would categorize it. However, I do know a lot of writers that do murals that incorporate their graffiti into other styles of art or use paintbrushes or do other types of styles and messages. And, at the end of the day, man, like we're talking about all this stuff and I'm talking all this history and all these terms, but I just love free expression. Just do whatever you want. Call it whatever you want. If it's a mural, cool. If it's a piece, cool. If it's just a doodle, I don't care. Just keep creating art. Yeah, that's a big distinction. Is that this is why I said the dictionary definition of graffiti does not cover letter writing culture. So graffiti is definitely based on letters. Sorry. Let's get you right after.
Yeah, you need it if you're going to speak.
Sorry. Is authorized writing is graffiti?
Is otherwise writing graffiti?
Authorized. Like you have the
Authorized
permission to do something on that wall. Is it graffiti?
Technically, no.
I still have one question here, and other people answer the question and give out the answers. I went to Mission District to see the murals there. Yeah, I wonder those murals are created by the graffiti writers, or they are from other artists.
Yes and no. Like I said, a lot of graffiti writers do go on to become muralists. Some people do murals and never ever do graffiti. In the Mission District, there's quite a big mix of people of both.
Can I ask you one more question?
Sure.
Yeah, those graffitis style are so different, and is there a rule to enjoy them, to appreciate them?
Is there for the styles?
Yeah, they are so different.
Oh yeah. That's part of the big thing is being original. If you have something that's original, you're always going to stand out, and that's a good goal to be as original as possible in everything you do. That's right.
So you had talked about Cholo style influencing graffiti, Bay Area graffiti. You talked about the bus influencing writing. Are there other hallmarks, other distinct things that Bay Area graffiti that makes it stand out that you could point out, like certain color schemes or certain patterns?
Well, in the 80s, I didn't really cover this in the presentation. There were two primary schools of styles that pretty much are still around today of cats that were doing, they kind of got categorized off, not everybody, but there was funk style, which is, as the name implies, like even when you think of West Coast hip hop compared to East Coast hip hop, it's funky. And that's actually kind of more directly connected to the New York City subway style writing. And then what Crayon and TWS was doing was new wave, which is influenced by like the European styles. Actually, Crayon told me how Jim Prigoff showed him a bunch of pictures of what people were doing in Europe, and he kind of took that and incorporated it. Those styles are really influential. As I mentioned earlier, MSK came up here and influenced a lot of people. But off the top of my head, the things you just mentioned, the buses, that's like kind of the more definitive things about the Bay Area that stick out to me.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned something earlier about the connection between hip hop and graffiti and how kind of one influenced the other, or rather, there is not. Graffiti is not just generally just hip hop itself. You know, it's a kind of form of its thing, but you can see that there are connections to it, I guess.
Mhm.
Can you expand upon that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I grew up, like I said, rapping. My friends were DJs. We all did graffiti. We weren't like, hey, let's go do hip hop. Like it was just what we were organically doing as kids. And then later on, I saw movies like Wild Style and Style Wars, and I started learning about all these different cultural things. And there's a school of thought, the four elements of hip hop: DJ, graffiti, rapping, breakdancing. Like, oh, okay, that's dope. Like, so this is all part of hip hop. I actually recently like started seeing interviews of like graffiti writers and even breakdancers who were saying, yo, that wasn't really what it was all about at the time. It was just happened to be coming out at the same time. And when they made those movies like Wild Style and Star Wars, they're like, well, let's just kind of put all these things together and call it hip hop. And they didn't really know what to label all these things. So it's kind of interesting that that connection was kind of manufactured in a way, but at the same time, like I said, is what me and my friends were doing organically. So there's like a little bit of a balance between that yes, those actually are like pillars of hip hop culture, but at the same time, like I said, you don't have to be into hip hop to do graffiti, and there's plenty of graffiti writers who like listen to like punk rock and metal and all types of other different kinds of music.
Hey, right on, man. Thank you for putting this on. You know, I'm about to be 50 years old, man, and graffiti has obsessed me ever since I came to this country, right? I came here when I was 8 years old. I didn't speak any English. And it's kind of a commentary on folks who may not accept this, right? For me, it was different, right? It prevented me from selling dope. It prevented me from joining gangs. It prevented me from actually doing drugs, right? And it's hard, you know, for me, and I'm sorry if I'm out of line for saying this, but graffitis are not murals are not graffiti. Graffiti is not mural. You can have two elements incorporated, right? One would be a mural, one would be graffiti. But I think for the, it's hard for folks who believe murals are murals and to accept graffiti as an art form, because one, it's illegal. And I'm ranting about this because I'm trying to find, once you fall in love with graffiti, man, I can't let it go. You know, I'm sitting in conference rooms in the tech industry and I'm doodling and I'm giving a presentation and I'm kind of doodling. But for the folks who don't understand, I think for the folks I grew up with, right, writing, it was because at night they were running away from home, they were running away from struggle, and this gave them, part of it, it gave them a reason to exist, right? So I think where you come from the traditional art form and legalization, I think a lot of people don't understand that graffiti is born out of a struggle, right? Somebody actually connects. And so do you think that I guess the question is, folks who traditionally believe in art perhaps may not accept graffiti as an art form because they don't know the struggle that the people are actually, who are driven to graffiti, go through. Does that make sense the way I'm saying that?
Yep. And I appreciate you sharing your story and your insight. And yeah, I agree with you. I'll just flat out say a lot of people don't accept graffiti because they associate it with black and brown people and they associate it with low income communities. And the art world is one of the most exclusive and high class, you know, worlds there. You look at all of the $1 million auctions going on in Paris and London. It's hard to break down those barriers. You can even look at what Basquiat went through as a black man trying to enter into that space of fine art. So yes, I do think that that's kind of always going to be a stigma towards like fully being accepted. It's really interesting too. Just kind of got me thinking, like just the idea of like what we call, for lack of a better word, indigenous American art forms that came in the United States, right? The United States is taking everything from everyone else. But something like hip hop, something like graffiti is something that was created here. And it's crazy that even that is still not fully accepted by the powers that be. So yeah, I agree with your opinion on it. Should we take one more? Yeah, that sounds good.
Thank you so much for your time. And I see on the screen you've got one with the bridge there, and you made reference to people coming in from other areas and hitting buildings or places that you maybe never even thought of before. And driving in the East Bay, there's an overpass, and there's just places where you see, you know, some graffiti, and I just think to myself, like, how the heck did someone even, you know, get physically there to make that happen, especially because it's not something you generally can do highly visibly or necessarily with a high degree of safety involved. Could you maybe speak a little bit to that? It sounds like there's obviously a lot of art and skills that are developed with the way of representing and doing the painting, doing the writing. But I suppose there's also certain skills with just being able to climb and to traverse and to be able to put yourself in a position at the right time where I'm sure there's a sense of urgency just by the nature of the activity. So anything you could share there would be cool to hear. So thank you.
Great question. Great question, man. I ain't climbing no bridges. I'll just put that out there, man. My life is too valuable to me. I've definitely been on my share of rooftops and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm glad you asked that because that is part of it, is like even just seeing the routes to get up there. It just being like, oh, if I just go over that yard, there's a little thing right there. I can climb there. I can shimmy up the pipe, and then it's pretty crazy. And those spots that you mentioned, like coming across the Bay Bridge and stuff, that goes to the question earlier of like, how do you stick out? How do you develop this reputation? Doing stuff like that is like those how the hell did you get up there type of spots. Those that's a pretty good way to stick out. Without giving up too much game, I've definitely, seen people who were like brought up straight up like mountain climbing gear to do some of this stuff. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. I'm cool. I'm not going anywhere up there. I don't need the fame that badly, but respect to the people who do. And it is impressive. I think actually that is important to talk about, like the feeling of having a limited time to create something. It's the middle of the night. You can barely even see what colors you have in your backpack. One of the cans just clogged up and you can't even use it anymore. And then you just heard something. And then your car drove by and then you just messed up and you put the wrong color in. That's some pretty crazy stuff to do. And I think that is also why graffiti deserves a lot of respect. Pretty much everything I showed you in this presentation was done under circumstances like that. Yep.
Dregs, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Dregs is going to stick around for a little bit. There's merchandise in the back. Thank you all for being here. Check out Mission Graphica. And thanks for the Friends of the Library for paying Dregs, because we like to pay people for what they do.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, let's kick it. I'm going to go hang out with Charlotte if you want to chop it up. I'll be over there.